we're talking about appraisal review, which is an idea very much in the air, right? It's in the air. Um, it's making me think about the Appraisers Association is doing a program in a couple weeks that I'm looking forward to with a couple really good presenters, um, and it's certainly a topic that I have a lot of thoughts about. So I thought, yeah, what a good opportunity to make some content.
Yeah, and yeah, appraisal review is something you have really deep expertise in, and I'm not sure many people know about that yet, so now they will.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely something I want to jump into. I mean, the short of it is that I helped, um, I coordinated the admissions process at the Appraisers Association, which involved, every incoming member before they became a member, they submitted sample appraisal reports that I looked at, gave them feedback on, and that they sent back to me, and I sent out to expert members for more feedback, which they then sent back to me, which I then processed into documents to give to the admissions committee so that they could decide if this person should become a member or not. And then after they make that decision, then I took all their thoughts and all the greater thoughts and everything else and compiled, you know, dossiers for each member, pass or fail, whether or not they were accepted or not. Um, and that was my introduction to appraising as well, because I was doing that, going through those motions even before I even understood what was going on. And that was, yeah, that was a pretty steep learning curve. And that was kind of the most rewarding part of working there. Um, yeah, so that's something I want to parse out.
For each candidate, it wasn't just one report as well. There were multiple reports on
Yeah.
different intended uses. So you know, the full complement of different intended uses and often the same objects that were
Hmm.
used for different intended uses, so different levels of the market. And
Hmm.
yeah, you have an extremely unique perspective on appraisal review from the years of experience you did that. And it was hundreds of reports every year that you were reviewing yourself, but then also synthesizing the appraisal review of other expert appraisers and communicating that back to the candidates.
Absolutely. Yeah, yeah. It was this fascinating mixture of seeing every incoming member is already a pretty heavy hitting, smart individual. So the reward of seeing their work, right, and then slowly beginning to understand what's going on, in those documents, but also seeing what the experts have to say on these people's work. And it would be sometimes be surprising. I'd be looking at what I thought was an impressive thing, and then somebody would point out something and be like, "Oh, I didn't know that." And often it would be specialized knowledge, that not a random individual would know. And then that was, and then seeing, the admissions committees kind of adjudicate between those opinions, especially when there was differences. That was when there was conversation. So yeah, it was like a long process of reading and absorbing, appraisals that people had produced, a long process of absorbing experts' opinions about those appraisals, right? Because every candidate had at least two graders, right? So there was at least two different certified members reading through these and providing separate opinions. And sometimes they're kind of in agreement. Usually, no one is ever in exact agreement. That's a total myth. But their feedback would tend to land in the general territory of, yes, this is excellent, or no, this is fine, or no, this is bad. So if they kind of agreed in that broad sense, that was kind of the actionable thing, the sort of democratic part of the admissions process. When they disagreed, sometimes, well, ideally, additional graders are brought in, and it's kind of, you're looking for best two out of three. um, Lots of times it's just a whole nother set. It kind of complicates the matter. It just kind of adds to the number of, cooks in the kitchen. And then that was really the interesting work that the admissions committee did, seeing what people were all saying, and then going back to the report and trying to figure out, who, what is the most solid path forward for this person. Um, and then after all that deciding, going back and, compiling everyone's notes and thoughts into a sort of a, you know, um, ideally a helpful roadmap, which sometimes which were, again, I mean, people, it kind of stings sometimes, I think, when people would get those. Um, and I think in an ideal world, it would all be softened and framed in a really nice way. But a lot of times, time constraints, some of those things are hard to eradicate or spin. Um, but the end result is hopefully, ideally educational, for the person getting the news back on their um, appraisal reports. Um, and one thing that my main takeaway from that process was that, appraisal review right now, if you look at what USPAP says it is, or various articles, it's basically one appraiser. The core of it is, your assignment is you're forming an opinion, not about the value of necessarily the property, although that can be part of it. But that's for now. We know that as appraising, so we're going to leave that over here. The unique thing about a review is forming an opinion about the credibility of the work of another appraiser, of the appraisal report itself. Um, and that is, to me, so having seen that admissions process and the panoply of different, opinions that kind of pertain to the same properties and the same appraisal report, that it is, because of the nature of appraising, which is a very kind of a solitary field. Like, a lot of people work alone or in very small groups and do not have opportunities until they're very advanced in their careers to see that many other appraisal reports by other appraisers. It's one of those things, I think, that in my mind, it should be a core part of the education. I mean, everyone has a class where maybe they're going through a sample appraisal. That's very valuable. But, I think people should be going through at least, many. I mean, the more the better. Almost in a way that you would think that, like, a student who studies literature or poetry is reading lots and lots of poems. I think
Yes.
appraisers should be reading lots and lots of appraisals, but there's not, for many can't often for confidentiality reasons, that's not usually happening. But it could, there's probably ways for it to happen.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's a culture of secrecy too that has impacted this. I think there are definitely ways that, imaginary sample appraisals could be generated
exactly.
that people could use.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Imaginary sample appraisals. Um, and yeah, and there's, like, there's a very atmosphere of, appraisers working with attorneys and occasionally being pulled into litigation. There's people have this idea that, oh my God, I'm going to be sued for the wrong opinion. I'm going to get sued. But that's, what ends up happening because of these things holding maybe instructors or people with the knowledge back. What ends up happening is that the people coming up through the education, again, all very smart people, but the feedback that they are given, the review that they are given of any of the sort of content of the qualities of their reports is a little abridged, is a little careful, is a little maybe placing accents on places, where that aren't as consequential. So what do I mean by that? I mean, I don't know. If you do a insurance report for one item as part of a class assignment, and you get back, three sentences, and you're like, not even quite sure what they're saying, that's not that helpful. I mean, yes, the person is looking at and maybe seeing in terms of deciding on what your grade should be, what that should be based on what you're doing, but they're not giving much back in return. And I think the thing about an appraisal review is that it could be, instead of being this sort of tool that's used at the end of the appraisal process in these special, very consequential cases, it should be adapted and be more of an educational tool. Because I mean, clearly, people out there, and I'm sure this will come up in the Appraisers Association program. I mean, the people doing the reviewing are certainly getting kind of learning. They're seeing what's going on here, and they're giving their opinion on the appraisal report. And certainly, the persons whose report is being reviewed will probably learn something as part of that outcome. And if they're approaching it in a dispassionate enough, objective manner, and understanding contextualizing feedback in a not personal way. Um, I think that it would just those two things. I think would be if people could just read a lot more appraisals, see the work of others, see the opinions of others on the appraisal reports. It would just really transform appraisal education, and I think really prepare people in a new, exciting way. I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I love that about your philosophy because it's helping people succeed from the beginning and get the skills they need that fewer people are going to get sued down the road.